Welcome back to Always the Jags, where we are talking about our Week 13 loss. Unfortunately, yes, we got to start this episode with that the Jaguars lost to the Bengals by a score of 34-31. Truly heartbreaking performance. I should have done a podcast a little bit earlier, right after it happened, but things kind of got busy this week. But a lot of things for Jaguars fans to be concerned over. The biggest takeaway from that game was Trevor Lawrence's ankle injury. Walker Little stepped back into play. I think it was in the fourth quarter, and he stepped on Trevor Lawrence's leg, and he was in obvious pain, went down hard, had to get helped off the sidelines. And, if he was out for if he had to go on injured reserve, Jaguars fans knew their season was essentially almost done. And what's been a year of the backup quarterback, I don't know if there's been this many backup quarterbacks playing, so many quarterbacks with injuries. It's been, it looks like here we are on Friday, and it looks like Trevor definitely dodged a bullet. From all the reports and everything that we've seen, that I've heard of, he wants to play, I think, on Sunday. I think he feels a lot better. I know, if he's feeling like he can play, he's definitely going to try to push for playing time. That will have to come down between Doug and the rest of the staff if they're going to let him play or not. But, can't say I personally know Trevor Lawrence, but from what we've all seen and heard from him, he's the kind of guy that if he can go, that's exactly what he's going to do. So, Jaguars fans are in for an interesting game on Sunday, but let's talk a little bit about the loss to the Bengals. I mean, it's hard to know where you even start. The number one thing I can say is this loss does not fall on the offense. For a lot of this year, it feels like the defense has been bailing out the offense. And we've been happy when it made us win games. You know what I mean? If we were winning, okay, great. We were expecting it to kind of be more, we were expecting more games to be like this one last night before the beginning of the season. We expected the Jaguars to put up a lot of points, and we expected teams to put up a lot of points against our defense. We weren't expecting a 2017. But then our defense started getting all these turnovers. Foye Oluokun, Josh Allen leading in Pro Bowl votes, having incredible years. And we were like, man, when the offense turns up, we might be better than we all thought. We might actually be contenders. And tonight, the defense, they just didn't show up. The stopping the run wasn't there. Tyson Campbell, I think, is definitely hurt. He definitely got put in a blender a few times, and he's just not right. I think the best thing the Jaguars can do, especially for the Browns game, I would rather have Tyson Campbell be ready to go for the Browns game, but Amari Cooper did not practice. He's still in concussion protocol. It's Friday. Chances are he's not going to be ready to go on Sunday. If the Browns don't have Amari Cooper, don't play him. Let Monteric Brown cover the Browns' third receiver, and let Darius Williams cover Elijah Moore. Let that happen. We don't need, because Tyson Campbell is going out there, he's tweaking, and you don't want him to tweak his injury so badly that he becomes a liability. And that's exactly what he was on Sunday versus the Bengals. He gave up that long touchdown to Jamar Chase, and then he gave up that critical 3rd and 10, where all T. Higgins, he put one foot in the ground, and Tyson, you could tell he couldn't flip his hits the right way. And they left him on an island. And, it makes sense. Darius Williams covering Jamar Chase with some help, leave Tyson Campbell on an island. He's our best corner. But T. Higgins he made him look, he made the Jaguars look foolish for that decision. And I know the Jaguars didn't want to, you can't double Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is an incredible receiver and will probably be a number one on a lot of different teams. But Tyson Campbell is supposed to be our guy that can cover the number ones, and he won't be able to do that if he's not healthy. So I think no matter what, I would keep Tyson Campbell out of this game. It also looks like Walker Little is not going to play. But that was the issue with our defense the entire night. We just gave up plays, and we could not stop the run. Looking back into the personnel, it looks like Foley Fatukasi was out, and I know he was a big part of our run defense, so that might have been partially what happened there. Him not playing probably hurt our run defense a little bit more. Devon Hamilton is back, but something's still not right, because he does not look like the same player who went out and came back. So the reinforcements the Jaguars were expecting, which is probably why they didn't make more moves at the deadline. And usually at the deadline, I will say, teams only get one player. They don't really go out and get multiple players. Like the 49ers, they got Randy Gregory and then they brought in Chase Young, which was two kind of moves that, like, Randy Gregory was known to be like just a depth piece, you know. So their main move was for Chase Young. Like, teams just don't really do that. And now, the Ezra Cleveland trade looks better and better every single day because he's playing well and he's playing better than Shatley. And now that Cam Robinson's out, it allows Walker Little to go back to left tackle. And now Walker Little is going to be out for the next game. So now we're going to have Ezra Cleveland as left tackle. And we're going to have Tyler Shatley in at guard, more than likely. Now it looks like Blake Hance didn't do a terrible job after, Walker Little and Trevor went out. And I think there was a couple of times where CJ Beathard looked like we might, go down and get the win, I think if Trevor was playing in that situation, he wanted the win too badly to come for anything less. And so I think he definitely would have got that touchdown. But just going back, we were playing, like, I would be, as a Jaguars fan, I would feel perfectly okay. Not perfectly okay, but I predicted us to lose this game before the season. That was before Joe Burrow went out. And if Joe Burrow had been playing, the game really wouldn't have been much different. Probably still would have been the same score too, because the Bengals defense wasn't stopping us. And Jake Browning played as well. The Jaguar, I don't know if we made him look as good as Joe Burrow does, or he just played as well as Joe Burrow. But it's like, if you think of Joe Burrow in that game, it doesn't turn into a beatdown because, again, the Bengals defense, like Trevor Lawrence, was carving them up. And so I think people would have had a lot more fun and would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was Joe Burrow playing. And maybe Jake Brown will go on some magical run and kind of justify everything that we gave up to him. But, this is a guy making his second NFL start. He didn't even look rattled. And it feels like if there's a chess match between Zach Taylor and Mike Caldwell, that's where I feel like we lost. Zach Taylor outthought Mike Caldwell this entire game. Every blitz, everything that Mike Caldwell was throwing at Zach Taylor. Every blitz, everything that Mike Caldwell was throwing at Zach Taylor, Taylor had to answer for, whether it was a screen, whether it was a dump off, whether it's like 3rd and 2 and you leave a guy man on man because you're bringing the blitz. It's like Zach Taylor could read his mind. He was one step ahead of him the entire game. So it was a master call on Zach Taylor's part, especially the way they started the game with a bunch of short passes. And then I think they went for it on 4th down, missed it. And then Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars scored a quick touchdown. And a lot of Jaguars fans were thinking like, oh, this is going to be we're going to coast to a victory here. And then the Bengals went down the field. And then they realized like Zach Taylor was just getting Jake comfortable in the system. And then he just let him go. And we couldn't stop him. And so it's just funny because it's like, I don't think Jaguars fans would be upset if it was the same score and Joe Burrow was playing. And it's hard to see how Joe Burrow would have been any better than Jake Browning in that game. Like if Joe Burrow was playing, he just would have needed to play exactly like Jake Browning did to win because Jake Browning played incredible. 354, I think he was 27 of 32. And like I said, I think part of that was the offensive game plan. And Mike Caldwell just got outcoached. And there were a lot of guys who weren't in position. I think also putting Tyson Campbell in, like a nicked up Tyson Campbell is still worse than Monteric Brown. I know we don't want Monteric Brown in there, but we don't, he's a backup. It's not, I don't mean you don't really literally want him in there, but he's a backup, and so that makes a big difference. But a hurt Tyson Campbell is still a liability. He's still a liability if he can't turn his hip and that hamstring is still bothering him. He's not ready to come back on the field. And so I think we hold him out against the Browns game, whether he feels ready to go or not. If Mike Caldwell thinks it's better, like if he knows it's healed and Tyson just needs to get back into the flow of the game, then that's better. But I prefer the excuse of the injury because Tyson Campbell's a good player and you'd hate to see a good player just lose it because of an injury. Like some players get hurt and they never come back the same again. So hopefully this isn't the Tyson Campbell that we're going to get. But yeah, it was a heartbreaking loss in a lot of ways. I went to the bar and watched it, and that there was a deep pass to Calvin Ridley, and he had it on the 1, and we got called back for holding. Now, I think that pass was possible because of the hold. Kind of, like it was a slight hold by Anton Harrison, but it's one of those things that you just probably won't get over for a long time. And our offensive line is playing a lot better. And so I guess we'll move on to the offense now once we finish wrapping up the defense. But against the Browns, they just got to be better. Josh Allen had a good play against Tyler Boyd when he threw that pick, but that was like gimme if you ask me. Like, he was right there in the right position. It's like you kind of be expected like to make that play. Like, if you don't, why didn't you make that play? That would be the response there. So we definitely got to play better. Everyone's got to be better on our defense. Losing Trey Herndon hurt a lot more than we were expecting, because I think some guys on a podcast that I listened to um, also pointed out, the Jaguar Report podcast. Andre Cisco and Foye Luakon were kind of out of place sometimes because they were trying to help Gregory Jr. get lined up so he could play the slot. And Tyler Boyd is a very experienced um, wide receiver. And putting a rookie on him in the slot is hard. It's going to be hard. And that made it tough because Gregory Jr. had to get lined up. And Tyler Boyd didn't even have like a big game or anything against us. We just had to make sure that he would be covered. And maybe Mike Caldwell was shifting some like help to Gregory Jr. so he wouldn't be one-on-one. Like I said, the Bengals have weapons and they have a guy to get them the ball. It'll happen. So like, at first watching this game, I was upset and like losing my mind because, it was like we had a great opportunity here and it was close and it did come down to the wire. I don't think it's just the Jaguars defense was not expecting Jake Browning to play as well as Joe Burrow. And I think Mike Caldwell was not expecting Jake Browning to execute Zach Taylor's offense so well. Everything Zach Taylor asked Browning to do, he could do. And like I said, if the Bengals somehow go on a miracle run and meet them in the playoffs, I feel good about our chances meeting them again in the playoffs. I think, like I said, everybody has to be better, and that includes Mike Caldwell. And like I said, it was a chance to go into number one in the AFC. And then it's like, but when you look at the Jaguars' losses, it's like all of the teams that they lost to either have proven themselves to be in the top elite category or were considered elite before the year started. The Chiefs were considered elite, and that game was really close, but I also thought we were going to lose it, and we lost it. The manner in which we lost to the 49ers was not preferred, but they also just beat down the Eagles after having beat down the Cowboys. When they are at full strength, they are a monster. If we see them in the Super Bowl, we're going to have to hope Trent Williams or Deebo Samuel is not playing. Or maybe Chase Young is out. I don't know, something like that. Whoever let them add Chase Young, Washington Commanders just need to be removed from the NFL. That is incredibly unfair. And then we move on to the Texans. And the Texans, no one knew how good CJ Stroud was going to be. And, that looks like, and we were able to kind of write that when we beat them later on in the year, which we should have beat them by more once we get back to talking about the offense, which we're going to. And again, the Bengals have a lot of elite weapons and everything. Before this season, I thought their weapons were going to be too much for us. I didn't think that Jake Browning specifically was going to be too much for us. But he knew how to put the ball where the weapons were. And, if Jake Browning keeps playing this well, that's the kind of backup quarterback you want to have, the guy that can do what you ask him to do. So, and that's the thing, like, Joe Burrow, I think he offers a lot of hero ball, and Jake Browning didn't have to play hero ball. He just had to play in the scheme. I think that's like Joe Burrow will make those back-breaking, crazy plays, extending them to put his team in a position to win. All Jake Browning had to do was execute, and that's because Zach Taylor's scheme and his plan was better than what Mike Caldwell came with. And that's the part where everyone's got to improve, and everyone's got to get healthy. Like, we got hammered with injuries. Those aren't our fault, but, it's going to be hard to make the playoffs and make some noise in the playoffs if we're all hurting. So we can move on to the offense, where I think the biggest loss is Christian Kirk. Because now that we know that Trevor Lawrence is feeling better, Christian Kirk, turns out he tore his groin. And he gets some kind of groin injury, and he'll be out for at least 6, if not 8 weeks, based upon the usual recovery. So that means he would maybe come back if we make it to the divisional round. More than likely, he'd be back if we make it to the Super Bowl. So that's a lot, and that's a lot of time to throw on a guy. And it hurts, and it really, really stinks. And it's all the more reason why the Jaguars need the number one seed. And it's still within reach, especially with just the way Trevor Lawrence was playing. And Christian Kirk went out pretty early in this game, and it seems like Trevor didn't miss a beat. Like, he misses Christian Kirk, obviously. He gives us a good chance to win every single game. But we have 2 tough games left, and then a much easier slate where, yeah, we can get through those games without Christian Kirk. But we got to find a way to win these 2 next games if we want any shot of having the number one seed, so we could maybe have Kirk back fully rested after a bye week in the divisional round. Maybe get the rest of our guys rested too, walk a little, see if Cam Robinson is back, so we could really be at full strength. Because I don't think we need to be at full strength to beat the Buccaneers, Panthers, and Titans. Against the Browns and the Ravens, because the Browns defense is legitimate. But again, if you watch that game, Trevor Lawrence was dealing all night. I think after the 49ers game and the generational talk and all of that, something lit a fire under Trevor Lawrence again this year. And now he's taken it to the second level that he knows that he can be at. And I think it's just changed to where it's like, before in this year, Trevor Lawrence wasn't really having to rely on himself to win games. Like, he needed to move the offense and we needed to score, but it didn't really seem as, like, I don't want to say frantic, but not as necessary, because the defense was really keeping us in games when the offense wasn't getting going, and then we just kind of won these games. And I feel like right now, Trevor Lawrence is like, you know what? We have been winning, but now I want to be the reason that we're winning. I want people to see Trevor Lawrence as the reason why we won. And the reason why we lost was because Trevor Lawrence went out, because he was dealing the entire night. And getting Evan Ingram involved, getting Zay Jones involved, getting Calvin Ridley involved. And that's the part where, again, Christian Kirk is a huge part of our offense, but I don't think it'll be as big of a blow to Calvin Ridley and the offense as a whole. Reason why: Parker Washington, first of all, filled in admirably in the slot. Secondly, Zay Jones' speed is something that's a lot harder to recreate, and that continuously opened things up for Calvin Ridley. From the slot, that speed threat isn't as much, and Evan Ingram can really fill that role too, because he's a really good yards after catch. So as long as he's on the field, and Parker Washington did really good in Christian Kirk's role. He caught a touchdown. He had a really good play where it looked like it could have been a pick, but he stopped the pick, and then he got the touchdown. So, that's one rookie that we took that looks ready to play. So hopefully we're going to keep this momentum going. I think I was looking at the playoffs and everything, and like I said, the number one seed is still within reach, right? We would have taken it, and if we continue to win, we would have just had it for the rest of the season. So the loss obviously wasn't ideal, but we are where I predicted we would be at the beginning of the season at 8-4. We're exactly where I predicted. I thought we would lose to the Saints. We ended up beating them, and we ended up losing to the Texans. So now at this point in the season, in order to get the number one seed, Kansas City is the biggest threat, and probably if they beat Buffalo, that's kind of it. They're going to get the number one seed, and it's going to be hard for us to do anything else. But Kansas City right now is the biggest threat because, well, the Ravens and the Dolphins are all threats. But the Dolphins still have some really tough games on their schedule. They still have to face the Cowboys, and they still have to face the Ravens. If they lose one of those games, they would have the same record as us. And we would win, I think, based upon our conference record or strength of schedule. No, if Miami can beat the Cowboys, but they need to lose to the Ravens, because then they'll have a worse conference record than us, and we will get the number one seed. Which, again, that's a losable game for Miami. They could lose to the Ravens. They could also lose to the 49ers. We haven't actually seen Miami beat a good team. And they still have to play Buffalo as well. So Miami could definitely drop 1 or 2 in that span. Hopefully 2, but if they have to drop 1, it's got to be against Buffalo or the Ravens. The Ravens still have to play us, which, again, people say it's a gauntlet if you look at the Ravens' schedule, because they're considering us part of that gauntlet, and that feels really good as a Jaguars fan. Like, used to be Jacksonville was just a gimme game. Now it's this gauntlet that the Ravens have to face if they want the number one seed. and the Ravens have to play the 49ers. So if we beat the Ravens, I think we would both then be have 4 losses, and that would give us the tiebreaker over the Ravens. But we need to beat them. We have to beat them. Now there's no option. Like before, we had an option where we could lose to the Ravens, and if they lost to the 49ers, had we beat the Bengals and the Browns, the Ravens would have had to lose to the 49ers, and they would have to lose to someone else in order for it to work. So we always kind of knew in order to get the number 1 seed, you'd have to beat the Ravens. And I picked us to beat them earlier this year. The Ravens have looked dominant at times and then very inconsistent at other times, and without Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson in the offense, I mean, the Chargers held them to 13 points for a good period of that game until it went to 20. And so, if you're telling me all you need is a little more than 20 points to score on them, again, that defense is the thing that's been playing really well. And so we'll have to keep studying the Ravens to look for a weakness there. And then Kansas City, the Packers did us a huge favor by beating Kansas City on what they call some controversial calls. But, each side had controversial calls on it. So that's not really a debate right there. But the Packers did us a huge favor by beating Kansas City. And Buffalo, they could beat the Chiefs. I mean, it don't look great, especially with all the stuff that Von Miller is going through. And I don't think Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are going to drop 2 in a row. But that's what we need to happen. So, Jaguars fans, you are Bills fans this weekend. You are Bills fans, and then you're going to be Chargers fans because it's just the Chargers look so bad. It's so hard because they have no reason to be this bad. Like, they have some injuries, but it's like, you look at Quentin Johnson as well compared to all those other receivers that were taken. Like they should have been able to weather Mike Williams. But anyway, getting off topic here. The Chiefs still need 1 more loss, and that can come against Buffalo. Buffalo is good enough to beat the Chiefs to make them 12-5. That tiebreaker really hurts us because, you can't tie with the Chiefs. 4 losses, you can't do that because they have to lose to Buffalo or LA in order for us to get that number 1 seed. So that's the plan. Hopefully Miami, if they drop just 1 game, but it's got to be in the AFC, preferably they drop 2. We have to win out. Which again starts this week with the Browns. The big game for Sunday Night Football. If the Chiefs lose to the Buffalo, then the schedule makers will look really good for putting that Jaguars-Ravens game for the number 1 seed, because that will be for the number 1 seed in the AFC. Because even if the Ravens win out, if they lose to us, we'll have the tiebreaker. And so I think that's going to test the heart and the mettle of this team and how much you want it and you can make something happen. Because we'll get guys back from injury and we'll be at full strength, and we're going to have to find a way to beat the Browns without them being at full strength. And I think the Texans, the problem is they're nipping on our heels too. And so some people are, you don't want to, put all your chips in on Trevor playing and have him get hurt and something worse, and then he's out for the season, and now your whole season is done. I agree, that's a terrible consequence. However, I will say, if Trevor feels like he can play and he is cleared to play, I think he plays. And I think he has to play because we have to win this game. Because if we don't, the Texans can snatch the AFC from us. The Texans can snatch the AFC from us because they have an incredibly soft schedule to end the year. The Texans have the chance to win out quite easily, actually. Next up, they have the Jets. Then they have to play the Titans. Sandwiched in between the Titans games is a match with the Browns, and they end with the Colts, which could be a match determining who gets into the playoffs and who doesn't. But for right now, the Texans are 7-5. They could easily finish 12-5. In fact, it's more likely that they finish 12-5, which means they would have more conference wins, which means if the Jaguars drop this one to the Browns, the Texans could win the division at 12-5. Because we're both tied because we won 1 and we beat 1. So the only way to keep the Texans out of the playoffs is to essentially win out. Because if we lose to the Browns, we also would have to beat the Ravens as well. Because if we lose to we already have 4 wins right now. So if we lose to the Browns, then we'd have 5, and that opens the door for the Texans to take the division. So essentially, what we always knew, the Jaguars need to win out But that's more important now because we don't want to be going to Houston for the first playoff game we don't want to be in there as a wild card. At that point, it's like I would rather take the risk and not make the playoffs if we got to go into Houston, because that's not a good idea. We beat them because we had the momentum and everything on our side, but if you let CJ Stroud into the playoffs, especially with all the emotionalness of losing to Tank Dell, they are going to do damage, especially if they get one of those games at home. So the Jaguars, in order to make the most noise in the playoffs, we need to win this game against the Browns. And as much as a risk it is as it is to have Trevor play, and maybe the coach might feel like he's got to protect his player from himself, but I agree, Trevor Lawrence needs to play because this is a must-win game for the Jaguars as far as seeding goes. It's crazy to think that we're already playing must-win games. It's crazy to think that we're thinking, this much about the playoffs and everything. Because again, as a Jaguars fan, we just don't really think of it. Like, you don't really have must-win games. It's like, hey, let's just maybe score. Let's start with that. Like, as a Jaguars fan, usually it's like, let's just score some points, and then we'll talk about must-win games. But here we are at the end of the season, and it's crunch time. And I think the Jaguars have two options. They can let these injuries derail them, but it's next man up mentality. They've been talking a lot about that on Jaguars podcasts and everything. And I think, like I said, the Ezra Cleveland trade, I think that was a brilliant move. I don't know. I mean, Trent Baalke's probably not feeling any type of way, but having Daniel Hunter would make us feel a lot better. Because right now, where the Browns are most vulnerable is probably their offensive line. I think Jack Conklin is out again. They can run the ball well, so we've got to be able to stop the run. And whatever, Foley Fatukasi can come back, that'll help a lot. But Wyatt Teller, he is a people mover, man. He can get Jerome Ford into good situations to run the ball. But the Browns don't have Nick Chubb, and they don't have their starting quarterback in Deshaun Watson. So the same way the 49ers played us, press man coverage, up at the line of scrimmage, play tight, don't let them dink and dunk, because that's all the Browns are going to be able to do. And Darius Williams, he's had such an up and down year. I still think he's really good. I think Elijah Moore is going to be the Browns' best receiver on Sunday. So Darius Williams is going to have to do his job versus Elijah Moore, and everybody else is going to have to stop the run. And, Foye, Luakon, Devin Lloyd's going to have to do their job against David Njoku. And don't let Joe Flacco beat you. Don't let Joe Flacco. It was a valiant effort against the Rams. And, they made some good catches, but the Rams put 36 on that defense. Now, we don't have Puka Nacua or Cooper Kupp, but we can put some points on that defense. And our defense needs to come to life. And again, Mike Caldwell just needs to scheme better. Whatever plan he had for Zach Taylor, it did not work. And I think he wasn't expecting Jake Browning to do the things that he did. But he knows Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's been in the league for a long time. It's not hard to know what Joe Flacco does because there's not that much that Joe Flacco can still do. So exploit it and let's get the win because we deserve the number one seed. Jaguars can get it. We have the schedule and we have to get it. The fact that we need to get it by beating an elite team is going to make it even more sweet if we can make that happen. I didn't think Baltimore was going to be this good before the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, when the season started, I didn't think Baltimore was going to be this good. I didn't think their defense was going to be this good. But they just got a bunch of guys together, and Justin Matabuke came out of nowhere leading. He has almost 13 sacks. So, first we have to beat the Browns. And yes, I will say this is a must-win game because the division can fall away from us very quickly. We only are one game up on the Texans, so if we lose this one and the Texans win, I think it would just take a couple more wins by the Texans to rack up those conference wins, and then they would be ahead of us. So we cannot let that happen, and we need to win. So it was always the Jags, guys. Remember, it was always the Jags. And so that's why I think if Trevor Lawrence is healthy, if he's feeling it, he plays, because this is not a gimme game. Now, maybe later in the season, like I said, if the Buccaneers were on deck, or if the Panthers were on deck, I'd say, yeah, you could throw in CJ Beathard, let him play. And maybe we will do that to give Trevor, a break but these next 2 weeks, he's going to have to pray and find some extra strength to push it through. Because we're going to need him these 2 games. Because if we want any shot If we want a shot at winning our division, we got to have this game. Really making it to the playoffs, we got to have this game. And if we want any shot of the number 1 seed, we got to beat Baltimore. Even because if we beat the Browns but lose to Baltimore, we still run the risk of not getting our division because the Texans are still right there and winning games. And like I said, I don't see anyone rest on their schedule that can reasonably knock them off. So, good news that Trevor Lawrence is not seriously hurt. Jaguars fans should take that knowledge, and hopefully this team can take that and motivate them to do what I've been predicting we do since the beginning of the season and what we can do, and that is win the AFC. Again, it was always the Jags. Thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time.